Billy, if I'm not mistaken, I saw Nikola Vucevic try to take a charge tonight.
Yeah, it was good. Actually,
Not to single him out, but where do you kind of stand?
the best line he had of the night was, obviously you can tell by that, I don't do that very often. Yeah.
Okay. But taking it off him, like in general, after 5 preseason games, where do you stand in terms of your quest for more physicality, more bodies in plays, more deflections defensively?
I think the first 2 games against Cleveland, we did a nice job. I think the last 2 games, Milwaukee and certainly up in Denver, I did not think that was the case. Like I said before the game, I think there's been a lot of guys being in and out of the lineup, guys being available, but we really coming back out of the Denver game, even the shoot around, really tried to expose that as best we could in Denver. Of plays that we had opportunities to. Everybody uses the same thing, the word physicality, be more physical, but like we were off bodies and we can't play like that, even offensively or defensively. We got to get into people defensively, and then we've got to try to screen offensively to help, create shots. All right, Jay. Create shots for one another. But I do think today was a step forward, whereas I thought the last 2 games were a step back.
What do you think of the 2 big lineup, and where are you as far as experimenting for the sake of lineup versatility? Like, how often do you expect to maybe do that?
Yeah, I think we could do it. Like I said before the game, I think there's going to be some times where we go into games and we've got to be flexible enough. I think possibly to change lineups. I thought Jalen did a really nice job tonight. The one thing about him is he's a really good floor spacer. He's got a good feel for how to get into open areas. And again, when they're playing 2 bigs, it's easier for us to match up defensively that way. I thought he had some plays at the rim in terms of block shots and rebounds, but I thought the minutes that he gave us as a starter were good, solid minutes. That was encouraging to see them play well together.
And I just wonder, how much of you is maybe curious about experimenting for the sake of just having lineup versatility, not based on purely opponent? Because I look across the league and some of the best teams have the handoff big, they have a guy that can space the floor, and they put them together for the sake of development.
Right.
How much of you wants to maybe just do that for development instead of opponent?
I mean, in terms of when you say development, what do you mean in terms of like building out the roster? You mean, are you talking about their own
long-term rosters?
Yeah, I think what ends up happening, there was a time where the biggest thing was everybody going small, right, and then kind of some of the bigger lineups have come back. I think based on how games are going, and if it's not going well, you want to change lineups or move it in there. I think you have to have it and be willing to go to it based on how the game's going. Listen, we're going to have to be a team where the whole is better than the parts, and in relationship to that, moving guys around at different spots or starting different guys or having different rotations or lineups out there is something that I think we have some flexibility with. Really had not experimented with Zach and or Vooch out there together. Sticks made a lot of sense to me today, just in terms of his ability to stretch the floor with their size. So, I think it's something we'll look at. We could also even look at, per se, with, like a guy like Patrick Williams at the 5 spot. I think you have to be willing to maybe try some of those things. It's hard to practice that way all the time in training camp when you're trying to build out an identity of how you want to play, and then you obviously are playing man on man, right? So you can't a lot of times do that, and then you're six practices into your first preseason game. So the practice does now this time of year start to get limited, but you can walk through things.
Really, for me, it just feels like the descriptor for Noah often when he came in was that he's raw. He's some ways away from being the player he could be. I don't disagree with that necessarily, but it feels like when it comes in the game, especially in the preseason, he's making good decisions. Like, how far has he come since he got in the building, and what are you seeing that's working?
Yeah, I think his feel's really good. He threw that great pass to Javon in the corner. He understands spacing and movement. There's just some times where he physically, I think, one, the speed of the game is totally different for him. 2, the physical part. He's got to really invest a lot of time, in his body. I think the skill, he's got to learn to play a little bit lower to the ground. I think because he does lack a little bit of strength. He doesn't really do much off the dribble, and even sometimes against offensively when he's cutting, the physicality of moving him off of screens and out of place. I think those are going to be all part of his development piece. But in terms of the IQ piece, in terms of him knowing who he is as a player and how he plays the game, I think it's very good. I think some of this stuff is offensively is going to end up being he's got to play a little bit lower to the ground, and his feet have got to, the ball beats his feet a lot of times. What I mean by that is when he catches it, he's never quite ready to make the next play. And that's something we've spent a lot of time with him on. I think in space defensively, he's really, really good. He's long, he's got good instincts, but when it gets body on body and he's got to body up and get over pick and rolls, and those things are a little bit new to him. But I'm encouraged with him just because of, who he is and what the makeup is of him as a player and as a person.
Obviously, they're different players, but just thinking back to this time last year with Matas, like how readiness-wise, how does he compare to where Matas was at this point last year?
I mean, I hate trying to make those comparisons, but the other thing too is Matas was much more polished off the dribble. Matas was much more polished, in terms of, being explosive and moving. And not to say that Noah's not that, but I don't think that Noah's coming in with the same maybe skill set or skill package that Matas came in with. And they're different players, and I think down the road they'll both be able to complement each other very, very well, and I would say that probably defensively, just instinctively, Noah's way ahead of Matas, at that point in time. So they're both, I think when you look at them as rookies, there's different strengths to each of them, and there's different things that both of them have to work on to get better at.
Last one.
I know the players don't listen to your pregame thing in the media, but, we talked a lot about slow starts, and you mentioned the turnovers. What were you thinking that game starts like it did, and there was 3 or 4 turnovers right away, a deep hole again,
Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean,
what did you see?
Yeah, I see on the turnovers. In this game, one was I think being rushed and hurried. One was trying to make maybe some home run passes that were not there, and just being a little bit more simple. Some of that had to do with spacing. I think we're trying to thread the needle sometimes, and we don't need to try to thread the needle, where it's it's kind of like a high risk, low reward. And that's kind of gone through our team. I don't know how many we had in the first half, but I think we came in, to the locker room, I don't know what it was, 12 or 14. I thought we were better in the second half. But we just don't have the ability or the margin for error to turn the ball over at the clip we've turned it over at in the preseason. The Denver game, or I forget one of the games, maybe it was Milwaukee, whatever it was, we did a much, much better job. We've got to be a team, in my opinion, that's got to play between 12 and 14 turnovers. I understand we're playing fast, but we can't turn the ball over at a rate that sometimes it becomes hard to overcome.
Also, I wanted to ask you about Phillips. We haven't seen much of him. Is there something to, these guys don't play for a while, and they come in with a lot of energy. Is that something you can take advantage of as the season goes on? Because you've got depth, and you've got...
Yeah, and I think we have to do that. The hard part, Sam, with that is like sometimes, you when you look at the depth, you could look at somebody's rotation by playing, let's say, 11 or 12 guys, 13 guys. You start looking at rotations at 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and guys in and out. It's sometimes it's hard to play like that. So I think that, listen, that does happen at times. I'm not saying it doesn't, but to give a guy an opportunity, I think 6 minutes is a good number. I think Julian came in and played well. I do agree with you that there was probably some freshness to him. I think that definitely probably helped him. But the other thing you can point to too is he could be out of rhythm from not playing also, right? There's kind of a double-edged sword there. But yeah, I do think we have to utilize our depth. I said in the pregame. Whatever it is, and maybe bigger lineup, maybe shorter rotations. I do think with the way we're playing stylistically, it's hard for these guys to be able to play, the idea of, hey, I play the whole first quarter. I don't think there's anybody on our team that could play a whole quarter the way we're trying to play, in terms of giving it all out there like that. So, if we can utilize everybody, so to speak, and play at a good pace and good tempo, because we are trying to crash the glass a lot harder offensively. We are, I think, trying to be a little bit more physical, and I do think it's a lot to ask of all of them. With the way the game's going, I think everybody needs some level of depth. It's just not just us. I think it's everybody.
One other guy I want to ask about, of the 3 big guys, you can correct me, but it seems to me that Collins has been really the most consistent of the 5 games, especially that pick and roll activity.
Yep.
What have you seen among those?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so. You know, he's done a really good job running the floor. You know, the thing that's interesting, I just wanted to go and look at it, and it speaks to the transition, him running and doing that stuff. I wanted to go look at it. So through the first, I think, whatever it is, not everybody's played an equal number of preseason games, but up to this point in time, looking around the league, I think the pace of play, number of possessions was at about 103.5. And I know it's the preseason, but if you put that in perspective, right now 103.5 would rank 19th in the league
For you?
for the entire league. Last year's leading pace would be right now currently in the preseason 19th. So my point is going back to these numbers and the way the game is going. You know, it used to be playoffs. Rotations got shrunk. Now it's. I think you've got to play more people, and they only can maybe not. They can't play as many minutes. But to your point with Zach, when he's out there running like that, I do think he generates easy baskets. I do think physically, he gives us rim protection. He gives us a rim roller. He and Vooch kind of play off each other, right? The things that he does, for us, Vooch does for us in other ways. But I think he's had a very, very good preseason. We'll see. He had obviously a hand injury tonight, so we'll see where that's at tomorrow. But he's played really, really well, and I think that he just landed on his hands, so that you're going to take a look at it. But I had to take him off. He has to come out. But the thing about it for Zach is, I think I give him a lot of credit because he came in even before September in great shape. He was in really, really good shape, and I noticed when I went down to see those guys in Miami that he was in really good shape. He's put a lot of work in during the offseason, and I do think when the trade happened from San Antonio, one, he wasn't playing as much, and certainly the style of play and tempo was a little bit different. So for him to have, the 27 games, have an off season, he's done a really good job for us all the way around.